shaking my senses. You found me when colors fade.
Well, it's great to be with you. Pastor Peter Prothero, good friend to myself personally and to the church and, of course, our movement. So by way of intro, why don't you tell the guys watching what you spend most of your time doing?
Sure. Well, my official title is Senior Pastor of Equippers in London, but actually I function as part of an apostolic company for equippers around the world. And so increasingly I'm traveling more into Europe and more across the globe and helping leaders, strengthening leaders, mentoring, coaching, doing that kind of stuff, and involved in church planting and other movements of churches who are wanting to make a shift to see an emerging generation become part of the new leadership of the church.
Amen. Yep. And that we share much in common along that vein. And you've had extensive background as a Bible college director and done numerous lectures, etc., and are very qualified for today's topic that we're going to be talking about out of the book of Corinthians. And we picked that because Paul's dealings with the Corinthians was a church that had all kinds of issues going on. And the church of today has many issues. So I thought maybe leading in, we'd start early in the book where he starts right off in the idea of contentions among them, where one said, I'm of Paul, another said, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Cephas, and I like the last one, I'm of Christ.
The spiritual group.
The spiritual group, yeah. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized in the name of Paul? So the idea, and it's a vulnerability for people to polarize towards a personality, towards an individual. What are your thoughts on that as he begins his letter?
Yeah, I think it's a major issue in 1 Corinthians. It's really a church in deep trouble. Mm-hmm. And the whole personality cult of leadership, which I think is something that's pretty predominant today,
Yes.
it's emerging and it's strong in Corinth, and it's causing division amongst the church. It's causing a fragmentation so that there's no unified vision, there's no unified language, no unified culture even.
Yeah.
And Paul's analysis is that he uses the word carnal. If I was to use a modern word, perhaps two modern words, I'd say immaturity, and I'd say the root of that is selfishness. Mm-hmm. And so there's lots of agendas that these Corinthians have, and Paul starts to address those agendas one by one. Mm-hmm. And the personality agenda is a huge one, and it's people with big egos. And it's interesting that the problem is not these apostolic leaders.
Mm, right.
The problem is the way people are choosing to relate to them,
right,
and viewing them in such a way, and then using that to bolster their own position within the church. You know, I've spent time with Peter. Yeah. We ate together.
So I know we made inference in the lead-in, but what do you think about that particular group of people? Because we know there's some popular writers today, modern theologians, that are gathering groupies in a sense. But what about the group of people that would probably say, I'm going to distance myself from those who are hanging around or drawn to personalities, and I'm going to just be of Christ?
Yeah. Well, it's just as problematic because now you're in the center rather than another personality. We call it Christ, right, but it's actually with a little c.
With a little c.
And it's me.
It's all about my preferences, yeah, my agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, and you gather people around you, and I think it's a bit disingenuous when people do that. And so I look to see, healthy church has genuine accountability, genuine connection, genuine receptivity to all kinds of ministries. Mm-hmm. And the moment you start chopping off and saying, well, we're going to exclude this person, we're going to exclude that, you kind of corner yourself in a way. Mm. And then you become the moderator of what is right and truthful and the best way of doing things, rather than having a generous spirit.
Yeah. And
just saying, well, that's not who we are, but, God bless you.
Yeah.
We can receive from you.
We can receive from you. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. So we got the personality, the high profile personalities, but then he goes on and he takes it back down to them. And he says, for you see your calling, brethren, that not many are wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. God's chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things that are mighty. And the base things of the world and those things which are despised, God has chosen, and the things which are not to bring to nothing the things that are. Yeah. So he goes from the grouping around the personalities, then says, and now look among you, and he lays this out.
Yeah, and I think the Corinthians were really obsessed with three things. They were obsessed with Greek wisdom. And so Paul says, well, look at your whole group. How many philosophers have you got in your church? Yeah. Is Socrates there?
Yeah, right.
Right. Is Plato there? I don't think so.
Right.
Why are you giving credence to Greek philosophy in a way that the world through wisdom did not know God? And then he talks about nobility, and sort of nobility would be the people who came to church with wealth. They had status in society. And of course, if you're a Corinthian and you found faith in Jesus, you look for lift. You look for some kind of progress in your life. But this obsession with nobility, and Paul says, well, just look at how there's not many.
Yeah.
There's not many wealthy people in the kingdom. There's a few.
Yeah.
And even when they are wealthy, he says, look, when you come to church, don't wear your braided hair and your gold pearls and things like that. Just tone it down a little for the sake of everyone else. And then not many mighty. And of course, the mighty people, but were particularly the people within the Roman army who'd accomplished great feats. And they had a lot of recognition. And so the Corinthians were enamored by these kinds of things. And then Paul says, you guys are so far from reality.
Yeah.
Look around the room. Look who God has chosen. And place value not in what the world sees as important, might, nobility, worldly wisdom. Look at what God places value in, which is his power to work through human weakness.
Awesome.
And I think that's the theme he continues in Corinthians. He certainly picks it up in chapter 3 when he says, who is Paul and who is Apollos? Ministers by whom you believed. But God gave the increase.
God's the one that gives the increase. Well, with that, we're going to turn it back to the midweeks. I know in those gatherings, there's probably super wise, there's probably Socrates level sort of philosophers in their midst and some very noble, capable people, but we just challenge them to remain in humility. Amen. Let's turn it back to the midweeks.